I wanted to start out, and if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your previous roles in higher
Mhm.
education to start with, that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, my name is Audrey. I have been working in higher education for 8 years prior to joining Teradata. I got started off when I was at Kennesaw State University. I was actually a student leader there, and I got really involved with student leadership and clubs and organizations and campus programming with a heavy focus on internationalization of our campuses at Kennesaw. I was president of one of their largest organizations. It was the International Student Association, which was interesting because as a domestic student, as an American student, I hadn't had much exposure at that point to international experiences because growing up, my family didn't travel. They're not interested in traveling. It was something I didn't really have access to or didn't really understand. And when I started working at the college, I started meeting people from other countries, and it just opened my eyes to there's things out there that I could love, that I could enjoy, that I could experience outside of the bubble that I had previously been in. And so I really took it upon myself to take a leadership role so I could learn as much as I possibly could about how to help these students. Another reason that I got started there was I noticed there were students that were really nervous about speaking up about things that mattered to them that they cared about because either they were afraid of being reprimanded or they didn't want to get too involved with the drama, or they had requirements from like their parents to stay in their lane and just get through school. I'm here, I'm paying for you to be in another country to go to school. That's all you really
Right.
should be doing. And so they weren't advocating as much as they could have, I think, for some of their services. And so for me, I was like, I'm not afraid of my parents are doing that to me. Like, I'm okay speaking up about things that I think you should have, such as getting rides to the grocery store. So since you don't have cars, you can be able to go get groceries and be able to sustain yourself. And so I was not only a student leader, but a really big student advocate. And so I worked a lot with the institutional leadership, the presidents, and the board of the school to discuss about what the needs of those international students were and what services should be offered to them from that point of view. And through that, I had the opportunity to become an international student to study abroad. I studied abroad in South Korea and lived with the host family there that I had met actually through being a leader on campus. And she was an international student who was going home to visit her family. So I got to go back with her and live in South Korea for a bit. And that further opened my eyes to, I thought I knew international stuff. I really didn't know as much as I thought I did. It takes, I think, stepping into those shoes to really understand what that experience is going to be. And it's still going to be unique for everyone. And so that kind of set me off on my career trajectory. With once I did that, I realized I really wanted to work in global education because I saw how much it affected my life and improved my life. And I felt like I was really giving back to the world. And I thought everybody deserves that opportunity to have it. So upon graduating, I went and worked for Georgia Southern University, where I was international student advisor. So I was a DSO and an ARO, and I worked with F1 students primarily to issue immigration documentation and help them manage their immigration records. And moved after being there for some time, moved into education abroad. So I got that experience as well, working with domestic students going abroad, as well as incoming exchange students and scholars in J1 status. Got to work with both sides of the spectrum at that point, which was really exciting. And I think that invigorated a passion, I think, for education abroad. Just I feel like I was working with students that reminded me of me, and I could see the value of helping them through their journey furthermore. Worked in education abroad for a bit, and then I moved back into international student services. And I was a PDSO out in Colorado for a community college out there, working with a very small international student population, but really helping that institution to understand what those students' needs were even more and to help with compliance and regulation for that institution. Then I started my PhD program. I took a little bit of a break, figured out where do I really want to go with international education, and the opportunity to join Teradata popped up. And since I had used them before in my previous role, I was very excited. I loved the software and I saw how much it helped the institution create accessibility for global services for both international students and for domestic students. I was excited to jump on board with that opportunity, and it's been a great year so far since I've been with the company. So that's a little bit about my journey and how I came into global education.
What's so great is that you have all sides, right, of the spectrum in terms of being the student and starting to see the opportunities, and then actually domestically and then being student internationally, working inside of higher education institutions, working now inside of Teradata, and how you can make an impact. And those institutions can actually help their students even greater. So it gives you a really great perspective. So here's what I'm going to ask next is, based on all of that, tell me something. What's at stake? What's the risk for higher education companies when it comes to global engagement success? There's a lot of resources that have to be put in. There's a lot of dedication. There's a lot of coordination. But why is it so important? And why are the stakes high for higher education companies to be focusing versus not focusing on global engagement?
Mhm. We live in a globalized world. I think that's no secret at this point. And students that are coming into young adults that are entering higher education at this point have lived their whole lives being exposed to the globalized world through social media, through the internet. And so they've had all of this exposure. But at the same time, I think a lot of people still live in a bubble. They think because I've seen stuff, because I've heard stuff, I know things and I've been exposed to it. And the purpose of going into higher education, I think, is to be able to live those experiences. And that is getting harder and harder, I think, to draw people in because they think they're already getting some of that through the internet, through social media. And so I think that's one in and of itself a challenge for higher education institutions to jump that barrier and show the value of what living those experiences is going to do for students. On top of the fact, there's just less young adults going to college at this point in time. So there is a higher competitiveness for recruitment and admissions in that general area. But also, I think one challenge for higher education institutions is so much focus has been put on developing these global education initiatives. And so institutions are like, we have to do this. Let's start checking off these boxes. And then what they realize is they're checking off boxes and they're not getting the results that they want for students that are being engaged or students that are studying abroad. And I think when you're looking at the text or the theory behind what you're doing, everyone's saying, oh, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Why are my students still not as engaged, or why are my recruitment numbers low? And I think a part of that has, again, to do with the internet and social media. There's a lot of what I feel can be inorganic engagement with students. Like you think you're checking them off, you're offering the workshops, and yet nobody's coming to the workshops. And so I think it takes extra action on the part of the institutions to have professionals in those roles that understand the students and know how to connect with them on an organic level. That's not just, I'm going to send you emails because we know students don't always read their emails, or I'm going to offer these workshops and people don't come to the workshops. But how do you develop a relationship with those students so that they can live the experience of being globally engaged versus just saying I did something to fill out a certificate, but not really going and experiencing those lifestyle choices. So I think that in and of itself is something I've noticed in institutions where schools may think that they're doing something for students, but they're not getting the results they want. And I think it ultimately comes down to they're not making the right connection organically with the students so that they can feel connected with the content of what they're trying to distribute.
It's really interesting because the majority of higher education institutions have global education initiatives, right? So therefore, the roles are put into place. And you're like, this is something I can really passionately get behind, right? And really helping students. And so you have the strategy, you have the initiatives. You're talking about maybe the outcomes aren't exactly what we expected, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's bridging that gap from the strategy of what we want to do to actually making the impact.
Right.
So I think that's really important. I think that's when we talk about what's at stake is how much longer are higher education institutions going to be investing in global engagement initiatives and strategies and programs if those outcomes aren't happening, if the impact isn't happening? How does higher education measure the impact of the initiatives that they're putting into place?
That is something that is a struggle even now, like something I'm really wanting to research in my PhD program is how do you assess and measure success with global engagement when you're trying to put theory into practice and if there's just something that's not linking, like how do you actually see what those outcomes are? I think one piece of it is to get in a room with students and to meet with them and see what they're doing and have conversations and have those students have conversations with other students as well. I think some institutions that I've felt really do a good job at global engagement will have a physical space for students to congregate and meet each other and have these discussions that just happen. Like they're not scheduled. We're not sitting here to talk about a specific topic at this time. We're just there. And you hear the discussions happen between the students that I think are more impactful and more memorable than the ones that you're like, we're going to have a workshop at this time to talk about multiculturalism or whatever it is, having something so broad, but being able to bring students into an environment where they feel comfortable to talk and share as they please, where they're not scheduled to be somewhere, I think has more impact. And being able to get those administrators or those staff members in that environment as well to see what's going on and to engage in those same conversations with students so that they feel heard, they feel comfortable speaking up, they can share what their experiences are. I think it's a more authentic way to understand what's going on within that world. And it makes students feel heard. If you have your leadership coming and meeting with the students and just having lunch with them, I think that's more receptive than we're going to have a town hall, show up and speak your mind or share your questions. I think that's more intimidating than just, hey, we're going to have a lunch. Come sit with me. We'll talk. We don't even have to talk about anything super intense or specific, but opening that door to create a community vibe, I think is really important for institutions. And that doesn't really answer your question about how we should be measuring or assessing the success. But I think that's a good place to start is just get into the room with the students and see where they're at and have that conversation with them.
You said one word that I kept thinking about as you were talking is
Mhm.
creating a community, right? Because it's one thing to physically bring students in and connect them and get through the immigration and get them to the point where they can actually get groceries and function as a real student in this new environment. But it's a different thing to get them to feel like they're connected into this community and they're making
Mhm.
friends, right? And then through
Mhm.
that, they're sharing in cultures and they're starting to live the higher goals that have been established for what we're trying to do. And there's lots of ways to measure community. Lots and lots of companies have created and explored communities and how to do that. So I think that's a really good answer, actually.
Mhm.
But I want to go back just a little bit. And the big elephant in the room is the big problem that higher education is having in lower enrollments and fewer younger students coming in. What's your opinion on how important is the impact of global engagement to taking on that big elephant in the room?
I,
Literally, like if you
yeah.
on a scale of 1 to 10, 1, it's not important at all. Not going to help at
Yeah.
all. 10, no, it's vitally important to actually bolstering enrollments and bringing in new resources into the colleges. How important is that 1 to 10? And then why?
I will say 10. I know that's a big number. That's the highest number you provided, but I will say it's extremely important because like I mentioned with students having these and being slightly exposed to global experiences through the internet, through social media, I think there's that desire, there's that interest. Students just don't know how to do it. And if your institution's not figuring out a way to do it, they're going to go find another institution that is because they're wanting to truly live those experiences. I think they're just not sure how to go about it. And so being able to make those experiences as accessible as possible so that everybody has the opportunity to pursue those experiences if they wanted to is extremely important, but also making that as easy and seamless as possible because the student population or these young people, they've grown up with technology and internet and they're not wanting to talk on phones or fill out paper forms. They're going to want to, if they're going to pursue that opportunity, which they want it to be as easy as possible with as minimal paperwork as possible. And so being able to ease that through software like Teradata, where you have that global education solution to ease that process, not only for the students, but for the staff members. So the staff members can be more available to be able to engage and interact with the students instead of having to file paperwork on the back end. That makes a huge difference. It opens up opportunities for institutions to do more authentic and genuine engagement with those students beyond just fill out an application to go study abroad, but to make the most of what those experiences are. And so I would say, as far as how important it is for institutions to be doing it, I think it should be everybody's number one priority because in this day and age, I don't think many students will be successful, I think, moving out until they've had some form of global engagement experience and education to prep them for the way that the world just is now.
I could summarize what you're saying here, if you were talking to the president or deans of this university and saying, hey, look, there's a limited and diminishing population of enrollment from domestic students, right?
Mhm.
But there's an entire world of students that want to come and
Yeah.
be a part of an international program. So one of the number one ways you just said, make it your top priority in order to combat this problem of decreased enrollments is
Yep.
global engagement. So you should be making a number one priority, spending lots of time and resources on it.
Mhm. Yes.
I'm going
Yes.
to ask a question then on the flip
Okay.
side of this. Okay.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people that are in higher education, high roles inside of global education that are fighting for resources, that are fighting for internal champions, people in other departments that are supporting the cause. So on one end, you've got what you're saying is this should be a top priority.
Mhm.
You've got the majority of institutions that have said strategically global engagement is a top priority. But then you've got the people that are responsible for bringing it to life saying, hey, I need help here, right?
Mhm.
If you were back in that position and responsible for a global engagement program,
Mhm.
are you having to fight for it on a daily basis? Or is it, no, we're charging forward, we're well funded, we just got to execute at this point? Like, where
Yeah.
are,
I would say in my experiences, it goes back to that it's a lot of talk and it looks nice on paper, but I think you have to really have your heart in it. The institution has to have the heart in it, and your administration needs to have the heart in it. And I think, and it goes back to establishing that sense of community. Like we're not just there to check off boxes because we have to, but we're doing this because we see the value in it and because we want to. And institutions should be paying more attention, I think, to the global education offices, because if I believe it should be a number one priority. Those offices should be getting more attention than I think a lot of them do. A lot of them are understaffed or they are, there's high turnover rates just because of the demand of working outside of your normal working hours or just the demand from students and like how much assistance sometimes they do need and the attention that they deserve to be able to make it through their journey. It can be debilitating at times. And so institutions, I don't think recognize that because they say, this is important, this is great, we're doing it, and you guys are doing good. You're fine, and you got what you need. But I think it leaves off at that because I think what my fear is that institutions will say it in words, they will write it down, but then when it comes to actually applying resources and attention, and again, that heart behind why is it that we're doing this? What is the entire purpose of this pursuing these initiatives? That can be lost in translation because administration, there's a lot that they're overseeing. There's other initiatives on campus that they're paying attention to. And so as long as it sounds this is a priority, we're saying it's a priority, there's an office that's doing this, but leaving it up to them to do it, I think you're just setting people up to not be as successful as they could be. So I see that point in that it can be a stressful field for educators to be in because of just the demand of the workload and the pressure from administration to make it perfect, but without the, I think, true support of that administration to actually get in there and see what the impact of this is. And that comes back to, I think you should be getting in a room with the students and everybody should be getting in a room with the students and understanding what is it that is actually going on? What is the result of doing global engagement? Why is it that we're doing this in the first place? And I think if you get in a room, you'll see that.
it sounds to me
Mhm.
like going back to when we were talking about how do you measure success and with the students on the engagement and the community that's created and then the referral business really that comes out of that, they should be your biggest advocates.
Mhm.
But it sounds like also there needs to be more community with the rest of the higher education leadership as well.
Mhm.
So that if I was running that program, what I'm taking away from what you're saying is that if here's how we're going to measure success. Part of the success that we're going to measure is your active involvement, your
Mhm.
active resources that are dedicated, your active advocacy for our resources and other departments and gaining a groundswell of support internally. That is going to be one of the biggest measures of success of this program, right? Besides checking the box. Would you agree with that or?
I would, yes. I think it comes down to not being a you and me or you're doing this for me, but this is a we situation. Like we are all in on this and on the same page and wanting to pursue the same mission, the same goals, and really having that at the heart. And that can be hard, I think, sometimes to find and to identify with administrators that get lost in maybe the politics or the stress of being in a higher up role and overseeing an entire institution with many moving pieces. It can be hard, I think, to get on the same page, specifically with global education. But I think that just in our day and world, you can't have education without having global education. One of my philosophies that I had as a student, because I was a domestic student, when I would tell people, they're like, "You're not an international student. Why are you doing this?" And I would say, at the end of the day, we're all international. When I'm sitting in the room with all these students from other countries, I get to bring my own culture. I get to learn about my own culture, and get to learn about what it is that I care about and I value just from sitting next to you and talking to you who is different than me. And so I think if administrators and schools can embrace this idea that we are all international and it doesn't matter where you are or what position you're in or what is it that you're going to be doing after you leave this institution, it's going to exist no matter what. And if you can put that engagement focus into the higher education institutions and make that a priority, I think you're going to set people up for success in the institution and outside of the institution when they move on to other endeavors. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but
I'll tell you what it did do is it made me reach the paper and write down one thing that you said is
yeah.
I want to make sure that I highlight this is
Mhm.
you said you can't have education without international,
Yeah.
right?
I don't think you can, not in this day and age. No.
Especially as you explain to me what you mean behind that, because I
Mhm.
can take some inferences away from that. But when you literally say you can't have education without international,
Mhm.
why? What's the
I, th-
explanation for that?
I think no matter where you are in the world, if you're in the US or if you're abroad in another country and you're studying education, we are so integrated with the way history has transpired, and there's so many perspectives from history that you can take for why the world is the way that it is. And I don't think in any instance of any subject matter that you look at, you're ever going to escape that at this point, especially with the type of access that we do have with the internet and being able to see what's going on around the world and in other countries and to be able to learn about other people's perspectives. And I think to have a holistic education within higher education institutions, it's so important to get those perspectives. And so to get that rounded education, you are not going to be able to escape that essence of internationalization, period. And so I think that's why it's so important to have those global engagement experiences, because even if you don't focus on it, it's still going to be there, but they're not going to have as much of an impact or be able to capitalize on those experiences to make the most of who that person is going to be and what their values are, what their morals are, and what their passions are, and what they're going to pursue after they leave. And every concentration I can think of, even if you're going down to the STEM route, which is more box structured, not as really pretty as maybe some of the social sciences can be, it's still international. Some of the best scientists and STEM researchers are from around the globe. And so to be able to work with those great minds in those fields, you've got to have some kind of essence of global engagement, internationalization experience to be able to collaborate on projects and make the world a better place. And that translates no matter where you're going to. Mhm.
We hear a lot about we live in a global community. We live in a global economy. What you don't hear is we live in a global culture, right?
Mhm.
There's still this big melting pot. And if we're going to be doing business and we're going to be interacting with people from all over the world in this global community, global economy, right? We should have an appreciation for all the other cultures, how they interact, how they can add their points of view, their perspective. That's just going to make us more successful. That's my takeaway for the last few
Mhm.
minutes here.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to ask you a question, focus a little bit more on if you were an advisor to somebody who had a very senior global education role, what would you be advising them in terms of here's how I think you can be more successful in what you're doing and accomplish everything you're trying to do? What would you be asking them or saying for them to do?
It sounds silly, and I think some people may not like this answer, but to put yourself in the shoes of these students as much as you can and stop trying to separate yourself as, well, I'm an administrator. I'm in this leadership role. I'm not a student. I have too much to see and oversee that I don't even have time to get into the weeds about what's going on in the day-to-day stuff. I'm trying to make sure everything's running. Because I think when you do that, you lose perspective of where you're at and where you're going, essentially. I think you're trying to make those strategic decisions without actually understanding where your roots are in that experience. And so if you're saying we should have global engagement as a priority of this institution, that means you as an administrator should also be pursuing those opportunities and those engagement experiences as well, even if that's going and talking to the students, if that's going and having lunch with the students, if that's going to international conferences or doing your own sabbatical or soul searching journey to understand where your place is in the world and why this is important. That's going to help you understand where the direction that you're wanting to move your global engagement initiative. Because if you don't have your own understanding of why that matters to you and why that's important to you as a person, how are you going to be able to explain that or advocate that on behalf of an institution and to lead those initiatives in the long term? My answer to that.
That makes perfect sense. It actually makes perfect sense. I'm going to give an analogy from the world of business where there's like big research companies like Forrester and Gartner, things like that. And they talk about how the C-suite has to be much more like a chief customer officer, right? They have to understand, they have to represent. And the highest voice of authority in any global engagement program is the student. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're saying is you've got to be closer to the student and the impact and what they want and what they need, and that you can get. It's very easy to get lost in the tasks and the initiatives of just doing the role and getting up to here.
Right.
So now I'm going to ask the question in a slightly different way. How is Teradata helping them? Is it bringing them up from those tasks that just rip apart their day and their time so they can't be doing the things that like help support the cause that they feel so passionate about? Like, what's the role now you're as that advisor, what they should be doing that and what Teradata does to help them accomplish what you had just mentioned?
I would say Teradata, first of all, it opens up access for students to be able to research these initiatives, to understand what's available to them and to pursue them. It eases up the time and the availability of the staff members to be able to to serve a larger student base. It opens up the opportunity to be able to track what's going on in your institution from a global engagement level. Like, where are students going? What are the feedbacks? What's the feedback that they're providing in their survey forms? What have their experiences been like? What majors are these students from? So you can better target either where you see maybe some students aren't engaging. Maybe they're from a major that, or you don't see as many of a certain major going abroad. So you can better target your initiatives that way. And it's because of the solutions that we offer, we don't just offer like application software, but we offer the travel registry. And it's a way to give an overview of where your institution is at so that you can free up your time, your personal time to engage with those students and see them in person. So you don't have to really worry about trying to file paperwork and create spreadsheets and reports every week to see where you're at. You can go in and have lunch with the students in your off hour when you would like to.
So a lot of that is it frees you up to do the things that you want to do and you know you should be doing.
Right. And it gives you the tools to pursue it. It gives you the tools to fully foster what it is that you're envisioning global engagement to be for your institution.
And is it giving you tools and ways to then also communicate with the rest of the management in the institution to get their buy-in, to help get their support? Does it help get that support?
Yes, the Teradata is they offer such robust solutions. It can do so much, but just one piece of it, the reporting features and the charts and the data that you can pull out of the software is so invaluable to help those higher up stakeholders and institutions be able to make decisions about why should we be advocating for what you're doing? Why is this important? If you have to put a number to it and you have to contextualize it in that way, it gives you that opportunity to provide that to that senior leadership so they can have what they need to make those decisions.
Because part of what you want to do is constantly reinforcing to everybody else that you need their support on a regular basis is that, hey, this is working, right? We're making a difference here, right? So you have to have time to spend with the students. You have to have time to constantly be an advocate for what you're doing as well. In a lot of ways, we've we've talked about this next question, but I'm going to kind of have you put it in a priority order. In order to be successful, in order
Mm,
to say, I am doing what I need to do to run a successful program and make a difference, what are the biggest problems that get in my way
mm. I would
that I have to deal?
I would say time. It's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot to keep track of, and there's a lot of moving pieces when you're talking about any global engagement initiative. If that's a communication plan you're trying to send out to create outreach to students, or if that is trying to obtain documentation to approve students for a study abroad program, or if that's for obtaining documentation for immigration records for international students, there's a lot of moving pieces at any given time. And so it can be burdensome and stressful to navigate in and of itself. And software like Teradata really alleviates a lot of that by keeping it in one place altogether and automating a lot of those processes. So you don't have to worry about, did I remember to do this? Did I make sure that this was done for that student? You can pull reports and see, do a progress audit of where all of your students are at any given point in time. So you can do strategic follow up and improve your processes for your next application cycle rather than having to wait through application cycles to see what's working or what's not working.
And let you be more proactive. Okay.
Yes, it creates that proactivity pathway so that you can prevent problems from happening in the future. And then I would also say maybe that last problem would be, I would say time, being able to be proactive and accessibility, I would say, for students. So you're able to open up that door for students to, rather than them being like, I'm too nervous to try this. I don't feel comfortable going and talking to somebody about this that I don't know to get this process started. Like it opens up the opportunity to share information with students publicly so they can do their own research. They feel empowered to make a decision on their own so that by the time they are coming to your office with questions or wanting to pursue a program, they've had the opportunity to do their own research. It's not a complete blank slate as far as trying to explain to them what it is that your office does or what you can help them with. They've been able to do that research by looking at program brochures and assessing what programs your institution offers and what makes the most sense for them at their current point. So I would say it creates accessibility and empowers students to be able to embark on that journey on their own or at least get started in that way.
Great. So with these problems, what are the solutions? What are the things that are going to be, if I got one time not being able to be proactive, right? And then this lack of accessibility, what are the things that they can be doing to address these?
So creating really making sure you have information on your website that's detailed, but also clean because we know students don't always read everything that we
Mm.
share. The way that we communicate is very different now than it was 15 years ago. Being strategic in the way that you're sharing that communication. So if that's either through utilizing students to be the voices of what your programs are, to be those advocates for your programs, or to have detailed and helpful information on the brochures. What is it that's going to matter to a student if they're going abroad? Like, where are they going to live? How much is it going to cost, et cetera? Having that information up front for them so that they can make those decisions is really important. And then for the proactivity is doing those audits of your programs, and which Teradata does allow you to do. So you can see where your gaps are within your processes so that you can work towards better practices and improving the experience, not only of the student, but of your staff members and administrators as well as within what they're using within the product. So it is important to pay attention to how are you using the product. Are you using it to its maximum potential, or are you using it with just what it needs to do to get you through the everyday? Because it can do a whole lot more to improve those experiences.
And I would imagine being very proactive and saying, let us help you expand,
Right.
help train you do this, right? The more
Mhm.
that you know, I forget what the stat is. We all know how to use like Excel or a spreadsheet, but the amount that we can actually do with it is tremendous.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Right.
just understanding the resources and the tools that are really available for you, not only the
Mhm.
staff inside of Teradata to help you, but the actual tool itself.
Right.
That's really important. So we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
What haven't we covered that pretend you're having coffee with somebody that's running the global engagement initiatives, right? And you're sharing and they're asking for your advice. What haven't we talked about that would be important that you would want them to know?
So I guess regarding Teradata specifically, I think I this whole conversation I've really been promoting about have your heart in the right place and really know what it is that you want, why you're doing what you're doing. And from somebody who is in higher education that has worked in environments or in offices that have had like kind of the best of both worlds of knowing where your heart is and maybe not being on the same page as other people. One of the things that excites me about Teradata as a company and about what we're doing and the software solutions that we're offering is that I can tell that the heart is in the right place from somebody that has worked in global education. The knowledge that we have within our staff members and is so diverse and so knowledgeable as far as coming from tech backgrounds, but also education backgrounds and knowing what the purpose is of why we're offering the software and how it can revolutionize international education in general and make this so much easier for offices and to improve the experiences of students so that they actually get the opportunity to go abroad. So I would say that knowing that is a priority and something that is felt within the culture of the company and something that we hold at the forefront is as a priority for us. We care about what we do and we want to be here to do it. And we want to revolutionize education in general. And so I think that's really important to note that we're not just a software company, but we really care about education as a field in general. So that is something I would want others to know is that I really feel like we have our heart in the right place. We have a lot of staff members that have their heart in the right place there and have lived those experiences as well.
And that you care about the overall purpose and the cause,
Mhm.
because most of the folks that we're talking to here are in it because of the cause, right? That's
Mm.
stay the heart. That's what that means to me.
Right.
If there was a single takeaway, so boil it down to what's the one thing that you would want folks that are running these programs to take away from everything that we've said here today? What would that be?
I would say, I hope you know what you're doing is super important and so invaluable to the trajectory of where our world is going to go and creating global citizens moving forward. It's so invaluable, the work that you're doing. And I think that we can all work together to achieve that same goal, even if we're not in the same institution, even if we're not even in the same field of global education. We all, I think, want those similar outcomes and want to build that community so we can continue to work towards those outcomes, even through hardships or crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic and all of that. Like we want to be able to persevere through those hardships together because we all want the same thing and we see the value in what we do.
That's fantastic. If somebody wanted to reach out and they may not even be a client, they may not know except for have seen this, but what's the best way if they have questions that they want to reach out to you? Would it be to give out a link to your LinkedIn profile or how would we do that?
Yeah, my LinkedIn profile would be a great place to start if they wanted to reach out to me, like via the Teradata route. My Teradata email is a really good one. If it's related to Teradata, I can lump that in with Teradata. But if it's just personally outside of Teradata, LinkedIn would be the best way to contact me.
Fantastic. And just for us that are curious, you're doing a PhD program right now. Tell us what the program is that you're doing and why you wanted to. That's a lot of time and effort and resources on your part, right? Tell us
Yeah.
about why you're doing the PhD program and what it is.
I'm pursuing my PhD in educational leadership policy and research with the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs. And the reason I wanted to pursue it is I just love education. I love learning. And I thought it would be really cool to just go ahead and finish it out. But even more so than that, I feel like I care about this so much and I know what I'm good at and my passion for this field and how it has changed my life and how I see the potential for it to change so many other lives. It's impacted me, and so as I got further in higher education, I felt like a PhD would be extremely helpful in my career field to not only understand more of the theoretical philosophies of global education, but to be able to become a practitioner so that I can tie in together that theory and practice in daily roles and to be an advocate for why this is important and to be credible in that area because I feel in my heart of hearts that this is so important and I want to be one of those people that can speak up for that and to fully understand where the field is coming from. And I've shifted a little bit. So I was in higher education for a while and I've shifted working for Teradata, but I still feel it's very applicable to be able to understand what those experiences are for those that still work in higher education, to understand what it is that faculty members go through, what administrators go through on the academic side. Cause again, I just feel education is very valuable. So I'm probably never going to stop going to school. Honestly, I'll get my PhD and probably still get certifications and keep going to school just because I like it that much. But yeah, that's where it came from.
Your passion comes through very much
Mhm.
so. Uh, Thank you for coming on and sharing all of the insights and everything that you've done here. It's very inspirational, actually, to feel your passion in the cause and what you're trying to promote. So thank you.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been really fun. It's really exciting when I get to talk about this because I am so passionate about it. So just thank you for the opportunity to discuss it today.